I'm going to get going. My name is Gail Clark. I'm the Director of Marketing and Community Relations here at Littleton Regional Healthcare. Um, Due to COVID, we did not host our annual Women's Health Conference or our wellness fairs. So we wanted to do something to continue to offer health-related education sessions. So we tried our virtual health and wellness series. This is the second in the series. We'll have another one in September. We'll probably skip December and do one in January. So just keep an eye out for information about those. If we find that both of them have been well attended, so we will more than likely continue to offer these next year. So I want to invite you to join me in welcoming Carrie Myers. Carrie is an exercise physiologist and certified master life and health coach. And she is the owner of Carrie Michelle Coaching, and then Ashley Wentworth. Ashley Wentworth is a registered dietitian and the owner of Ashley Wentworth Nutrition. I've had the pleasure of knowing both of these ladies for a number of years, and they have presented at the Women's Health Conference that LRH hosts and been present at our wellness fairs as well. Tonight's virtual wellness fair is made possible by a generous donation from the LRH Auxiliary. The Auxiliary is a group of women and men who volunteer their time to help raise money for the hospital, to make the patient experience better, to help visitors, to help staff. They do a lot of things behind the scenes. So I do want to extend a very special thanks to them. Those of you who are on this call and are not familiar with the Auxiliary, we will be reaching out to you at some point in the future to give you more information, just in case you're interested in getting involved. So on that note, I am going to turn it over to Heather McKean. Heather McKean is the marketing manager at Littleton Regional Healthcare, and she is also going to be tonight's moderator. So thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Gail. As just a reminder, there is a chat feature at the bottom of everyone's screen, or there should be. I will monitor any questions or comments that come in, and then Ashley and Carrie will leave time at the end and address any of those questions, comments, concerns that come up. If you think of something along the way, feel free to type it in as it comes up, or you can wait till the end, and we will certainly try to do our best to address everyone's comments, concerns, questions. Other than that, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you, Heather and Gail.
Yes, thank you. So we have a little slideshow for you all. So I'm going to bring that up for us. Can everybody see it?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, Carrie, you want to intro?
Ashley Wentworth Nutrition and Carrie Michelle Coaching features. Yeah. No more waiting. So this is a topic, as you'll see, that Ashley and I are super excited and super passionate about. And no more waiting is a play on words in a couple ways. We hope to sort of get you thinking about why you might want to give up dieting forever. So that's the no more waiting part. And also, what are you putting off in your life because of your weight or your body image and things like that. And so no more waiting.
Yeah, so like Carrie said, we're going to talk about all of that and more. So kind of the takeaway messages from our session tonight are going to be talking about why diets don't work. And I feel like a lot of us already know that, but we're going to expand on why that might be. We're going to also talk about risk factors of dieting. So not only do they not work, there is some danger in dieting. We'll also talk about a term that Carrie and I use a lot called diet culture. So we'll explain what that is, and we'll talk about how it has us trapped and how we can maybe get out of that trap. We'll also talk about what food and body freedom looks like and feels like. And throughout, we'll do a little introduction of intuitive eating, which is a gateway to that food and body freedom that we just mentioned. So a little bit more about us. So thank you, Gail, for the intro. So as Gail mentioned, I'm a registered dietitian. So I practice nutrition, and I'm a big food enthusiast. So I love food. And Carrie?
And as an exercise physiologist, I work with people with exercise, including in cardiac rehab. I'm a conqueror of an eating disorder. And I'm also the author of Squeezing Your Size 14 Self into a Size 6 World, a real woman's guide to food, fitness, and self-acceptance. And a lot of what Ashley and I do, it's both personal, but also professional. So it's just, like I said, it's something that we're both really passionate about. And our superpowers also, what we are hoping to do tonight is empower you to break free from diet culture by revealing the lies you've been told about your body and health, ridding yourself of guilt and shame around food and your body, and giving you permission to reinvent how you approach your own view of self and wellness. And I also want to add that this isn't just stuff that we've made up. This is all evidence-based, meaning that there's science and research behind all of it to support it.
Definitely. Thank you, Carrie. So we'll start off by talking about what the heck is diet culture and why do you guys keep saying that word? So diet culture is just the culture that we live in. Our culture especially worships this idea of thinness being better. And it equates our body size to how that fits into our health. It also promotes weight loss to achieve a higher status in our culture, kind of equating if you're thinner, maybe you're a little bit more worthy. And it makes certain ways of eating good or bad. It oppresses people in larger bodies, and it's very fat phobic.
Right. And we are immersed in diet culture, especially if you are on social media at all. You'll see diet culture all over the place, and it's really hard to avoid the messages of it.
For sure. So that's a very brief explanation of diet culture. And so now we'll kind of move into, well, what is a diet? And I think we've all heard of some fad diets. So things like Atkins, keto, other examples are Weight Watchers. And then there's also things that we might not necessarily think of as a diet, but they still are. So we wanted to kind of give everybody an idea of what to look for when we're talking about what a diet is. So there's a few clues, which we have mapped out for you here. So diets are really anything that has any rules around food. So it tells you what, how much, or when to eat. And it also could be anything that has different goals of changing your body size, weight, or appearance. So like, for example, clean eating. Clean eating isn't necessarily marketed as a diet program, but because there are still rules around the types of food to eat, it definitely is still a diet. I think the diet industry has gotten really smart that most people know that the fad diets don't really work long-term. So they've gotten kind of sneaky and have sort of crafted different messaging and call them like lifestyle changes, or maybe they're not called diets at all. They're just like we talked about, like clean eating, for example.
Right, and clean eating also, Ash, right? There's actually a scientific term for people that have an obsession with the clean eating, and that's orthorexia.
Yeah.
So it is actually a type of established eating disorder. So when we don't think about that, we think that that's sort of something that we should aspire to, when in fact it actually isn't healthy for you.
Right.
To be that obsessed with it, that obsession with it.
Right. Thank you, Carrie. So after our explanation, we have a little poll for you. So Heather's going to put a poll in. It should just pop up on your screen. And so we're just curious if you all wanted to answer this question. So based on the criteria we were just talking about, how many diets do you think you've been on or tried before?
I apologize. It doesn't seem to want to go, but if people, it looks like a couple people have already caught on. They're putting it into the chat. Please feel free to do that. You can send it either publicly or just to the panelists, and we'll keep all of the answers that come in anonymous.
Awesome. So we're seeing a couple different things, lots of big ranges, just a couple to quite a few. Yeah, so that's definitely, I think, what Carrie and I see. Lots of different ranges of people trying diets. Many, somebody just put in. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, ladies, for.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. We really appreciate that. And like I said, it's very, very much a part of our culture. And, you know, dieting has become this normalized thing. And I think we're going to get into that a little bit more, so I don't want to say too much more about it. But yeah, some repeats too. Definitely, definitely. All right. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So now we're going to get into a little bit about some reasons, 4 to be exact, to ditch dieting. Carrie, do you want to say anything else?
Nope.
Just checking.
Did I look like I did?
Nope, just checking on you. So reason number 1 to ditch dieting is that they don't work. And I think that we all know this, like I mentioned earlier, but it's really impossible to maintain a diet long-term, right? And when we sort of embark on a diet or one of the lifestyle changes, we sort of all know that there's like this endpoint probably. And whether it's a timeline, like a 12-week program, or if there's like a goal weight to reach at the end, there's some sort of time frame associated with it. And so it's impossible to maintain that long term. And it leads to this really vicious cycle. And I think you all know what I'm talking about. Dieting, we're going to get into a little bit more about the diet cycle. We have a nice slide for that. So for success rate, there's that little graph on the left. And so research has shown us that when people are dieting afterwards, between 1 and 5 years later, even if people have had weight loss initially on that diet, 95% of people are going to gain that weight back. And most of the time they gain it back and then some.
Which all of you probably know the term yo-yo dieting is one of the terms for that, where you diet, lose the weight, you gain it back, and a lot of times it's more than. And some of you might be thinking right now too, yeah, but you know, the diet worked because I lost the weight, right? Or I've seen studies that show that diets work, but a lot of the studies that show that the certain diets work are not long-term studies. They tend to be maybe 6 months to a year long. You really need a minimum of 2 years and preferably longer than that to show, you know, that it really works. And the studies show that really it's that 95% that just, they don't work for 95% of people. So.
And this is a little bit more about that diet cycle. So it's a little busy, but we'll kind of take you through. I'll see if I can get my mouse to sort of, can you guys see my mouse okay? Okay.
Yep.
So Carrie, do you want to talk about the diet cycle?
Sure. So you start the diet and that you kick into the restriction because it's going to restrict something, right? It's either going to restrict calories or a food group or certain foods. There's some sort of restriction on the diet. that kicks you into a deprivation mindset. And there's all kinds of interesting studies that one of them is they took kids, for instance, and they gave them M&Ms. So you can add in here, Ashley, if I get it wrong or anything. But I think they told them not to eat the red ones. And they left the room, and they had all these M&Ms they could eat, just not the red ones. And what ones do you think they ate?
The red ones.
Right. Because that is how our brain works. Our brain doesn't like to be deprived. And as soon as we are told we can't have something, that's exactly what we want. So that leads to craving. You start craving the foods that you have been told you can't eat. And there have been some interesting studies done on some, one of them was men, and was it World War II, Ashley? And they were still allowed to eat 1,700 calories a day. And these young men, all they could think about was food. They became obsessed with food. They started talking about recipes and sharing recipes and talk, that's all they could talk about, because they were just craving their food, because their body was like, what are you doing here? Like, this isn't enough food for us. And a couple of them actually defected and went, one of them binged on milkshakes, I think. Another one was on candy, and then, got sick on it. So we crave when we are deprived of foods that especially ones that we enjoy, but either way, you start craving those foods, and then you give in. Like those men, they gave in to the cravings. And then how do you feel? Oh my gosh, I'm a failure. I suck. What is wrong with me? Why don't I have any willpower? Why does everyone else have willpower and I don't? You want to say something about that, Ash?
Yeah. So my thing is that willpower should not really be talked about when we talk about food, because, it's not necessarily willpower. There's a lot of biological responses in our body to help keep us alive. And our body doesn't really know the difference between dieting on purpose for weight loss or body changes versus we're going to starve to death. So that's sort of what we talk about in this little inner circle here. We have a lot of biological mechanisms to keep us alive, right? So if we didn't have access to food in caveman days, our bodies had all these cool responses to keep us alive and to go find food. So like Carrie was mentioning, our body senses that there's some restriction and it tells us to get off our butts and go find food. So it increases our hunger signals and it makes us think about food more so that we go out and find it. And any of you who have been on a diet before know about, I feel hungrier when I'm on a diet and that's all I can think about. And so it's not necessarily about willpower when we finally do give in and have something. It's because our body's biology is fighting us really hard to go get food, and there's no way that we'll ever win against our body's biology. And then again, on the inner circle here, so there's the kind of emotional, physical side of the diet cycle. But what happens is when we decrease the calories to begin with, the weight loss that we typically have first is usually our protein stores. So we'd all really like it to be body fat that we're losing when we start a diet, but usually it's a protein store. And where does protein come from in our bodies, Carrie? Muscle, exactly. And so we tend to lose muscle mass first, and then we are tanking our metabolism that way because muscle is a living tissue that uses up energy. So if we're losing protein, we're losing part of our metabolism. And then when we do crave and give in, then our calories go up again, and that triggers fat storage. So we're losing protein, and then we're adding fat storage back in when we finally have this weight gain piece. So Carrie, anything to add before I move on to the next slide?
Well, just a little story. When I was first out of college, and I had this one job, and for only 3 months because I hated it, but it was with a medically supervised liquid diet program. And one of the women that went through it reached her goal weight. And she came in one day to me with a friend of hers who had not gone through the program. This woman she ate intuitively. And she was active, and they both came in and wanted me to do their body fat percentage, and I did. And the woman that had not gone through the program was in a healthy range, and the woman who had gone through the program was still considered in the obese range. And that's exactly why, like what Ashley just described, is because she lost so much of her muscle mass, and didn't really lose the fat. So in the medical world, there's this term called skinny fat. We don't like using those terms necessarily, but it's just to show that you can look thin, but still not necessarily be healthy.
And we'll move into reason number 2 to ditch dieting is that diets are harmful. So it sort of leads right into what we were talking about. So the physical risks, like we were just mentioning, is that loss of muscle, and that weight gain and that weight cycling, that yo-yo dieting, like we mentioned, puts us at risk for more things like osteoporosis, and that weight going up and down makes our body shape actually change. So the more times we do that, the more likely we are to have more stores of fat around our abdomen. And that puts us at increased risk for heart disease, early death. Not to mention, diets are just really bad nutrition. You know, nutrition is about variety and patterns. And if we're constantly restricting like entire food groups, like some diets suggest, we're missing out on nutrition from those entire food groups. So take dairy, for example, which is usually one of the first ones to go on a diet. We're then missing out a lot on calcium, vitamin D, and most Americans are really lacking in vitamin D anyways. So they're just not great nutrition. And again, that reduced metabolism and increased fat storage, it also kind of messes around with our hunger and fullness cues. So the more we diet, the more we ignore our hunger, the more we are listening to someone else tell us how much to eat or when to eat, our hunger and fullness cues can get really out of whack. I've had several clients recently that don't even feel hunger in their bellies, and they're sort of trying to figure out, well, what does hunger look like in my body? A lot of people might be getting only headaches to show that they're getting hungry instead of that, you know, normal tummy rumbling. Carrie, anything else on the physical risks on your side?
No, I think you covered it all.
Okay. You want to talk about the mental and emotional risks?
Sure. So like we talked about with that one study, you get obsessive food thoughts, and then cravings, and that might lead to binge eating because you put off, right, as long as you can, of not eating these foods that you're not supposed to eat, and then you end up binging on them when you finally give in because, well, there's different reasons, because you just kind of feel out of control with it, and it's kind of like what do they call it? The what the hell effect? Like, well, I started this, so I'm just going to go full force with it, right? And just get it all out of my system. And then there's an increased risk of developing disordered eating and eating disorders. And lots of studies show that. There's an increased stress and susceptibility to stress. And that sort of goes hand in hand with that, what Ashley was talking about, where your metabolism changes and you tend to get more fat storage around your middle. And then there is lowered self-esteem, because kind of in that cycle, when that shame and that guilt, and you feel crappy about yourself, right? And it erodes your confidence in your self-trust, because a lot of people diet, they just want to be told what to eat because they don't trust themselves. And that's sort of also what we hope to sort of start instilling in you, that you can trust yourself. We were all born with the ability to trust ourselves, knowing when we're hungry and when we need to be fed.
Definitely. And just to expand on a couple things, the stress piece, dieting in general puts more stress hormone into our body, because again, our bodies go into this, like, what are you doing kind of phase when we're dieting, that like famine response. And then just to elaborate again on disordered eating versus eating disorders. So eating disorders are clinical mental health conditions. So those are definitely a little bit more severe. However, a lot of us do have disordered eating behaviors, and most of us think of them as normal. So a lot of diet behaviors or rule following or, lots of different things that diets promote are actually considered kind of disordered eating behaviors. All right, so moving on to reason number 3 to ditch diets, that dieting and weight loss don't guarantee improved health. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. Carrie?
So mainstream media would have us believe that obesity causes a myriad of health conditions and premature death. Thin does not equal healthy, and overweight doesn't mean that you're unhealthy. You can be fit, and again, the term fit and fat, right? And but Ashley wants to talk too about the correlation versus causation, because there's a lot of the mainstream media doesn't, they want you to believe that being overweight causes premature death and in these health issues, when in fact, Ashley.
Yeah, so when we do research studies, one of the mainstays of research is that we can only show associations or correlations when we do research. We can't necessarily prove all the time that one thing will cause another thing. And that's especially true around weight loss studies and weight and health studies. So for example, if being in an overweight body caused diabetes, everyone in a larger body would have diabetes, or everyone that had a certain percent of body fat would have diabetes. And that's just not true, right? Carrie and I see that all the time with our clients, people in larger bodies that don't have diabetes. And that's because they're only correlated. So we can't prove that one thing caused the other thing. They're just associated. Yeah, and I think you guys have picked up on the fact that Carrie and I keep using air quotes around the words obesity and overweight, those nasty O words. And we do that because we only really use them when we're talking about research studies that use those terms, because those terms are really stigmatizing and very shame-inducing, and they're not very helpful. So Carrie and I tend to use other terms like larger body or fat, or depending on how people like to be described in their bodies, kind of changing the narrative a little bit. And a little bit more on what Carrie was just talking about. Health can come in many shapes and sizes. So people can be really healthy in lots of different sizes, and people can be really unhealthy in lots of sizes. Health can be improved regardless of weight. And what usually happens is, we might think that weight loss is going to solve our health issues. And so we're embarking on some weight loss. And usually that turns into dieting and exercising more. And again, we just talked about how that's not sustainable. So then we're going to gain that weight back, which causes a lot of those issues that we were mentioning earlier. But what we can do instead is focus on our health behaviors, or things that we can actually change, like our nutrition, like our activity, like our sleep, like our stress management. All of those things are way more important than just our weight alone. And, I've met lots and lots of people that have lost weight in really, really unhealthy ways. And usually their providers are just complimenting them, like, oh, good job on your weight loss. They don't necessarily ask how they got there or what they did. Maybe they're fasting for 3 days at a time. Well, that's definitely not a great idea. And again, those health benefits stay with us, as opposed to that weight cycling piece, whereas we're going to lose those health benefits once we gain weight back.
Yeah, I have a perfect example of this a few years ago, many years ago, like 15 years ago, because I had said that, so I overcame anorexia, but I was at a stressful point in my life, and anorexia for many years was sort of my security blanket. And it was one of those times in my life. And I got to the doctors, and my normal doctor was out, so there was someone covering. And he weighed me, and his response was, "Oh, very good BMI. You don't see too many Americans with such a low BMI." And I was anorexic. I had just dropped like 15 pounds very quickly. And it's very unhealthy. Mm-hmm. So the scale does not tell the story at all. And that's one of the things that we encourage you also to try to get off the scale, because that's a great example that I was super unhealthy, but I actually had encouragement from a medical professional telling me, keep up the good work. So
yeah, and I've heard lots and lots of stories like yours, Carrie. So thank you for sharing that. Oops, here we go. So reason number 4 to ditch dieting. Diets waste a lot of stuff. They waste our time, they waste our energy, they waste our money, and they waste our health. So we just covered most of the health pieces. But as far as the other pieces, diets waste a lot of time. We spend so much time, especially as women, let's face it, talking about food, thinking about how food is going to make our bodies look. We spend a lot of time thinking about our appearance. I did some really fast math when we were putting this together. And so I found some statistics, and this is probably really undershooting, but I took the fact that most people are probably doing about 2 diets per year, and that's probably for about 40 years. And let's say the average length of that diet is about 10 days. Some might be way longer, some might be shorter. And so the average number of diets somebody does is more than 126 usually. But based on all that math, that equals to 2 years of straight dieting, 2 whole years.
No breaks there. Like
No breaks.
2 straight years of
your life. Yeah. So it takes up so much of our time. And it takes up a lot of money, right? So think about all the programs people pay for, even just monthly subscriptions to different things like maybe Weight Watchers. The diet industry is about $72 billion a year, and they are honestly the best marketers. And I hate them for it, but they're so smart. They've convinced us that they're going to give us these wonderful results. They know that that's not true. And so they sell us their product, we do their product. And then when the product doesn't work for us, instead of returning it, like we would a microwave to Walmart if that didn't work, we start blaming ourselves. Why couldn't I do this? Why couldn't I stick to it? If I just followed it better, if I just had more willpower, like we mentioned earlier, I would have had the results too.
And all that guilt and shame sets in, and then the cycle just starts all over again, right? Just perpetuates.
Yeah. So let me do this next one. Maybe I'll do better next time. Exactly. And not to mention energy, right? So mental energy, physical energy. Yeah, a lot of wasteful stuff.
And any of you feel like that, like when you start really thinking about all of this, can you feel that energy draining out of you when, as we're talking about this? Because I do. It's exhausting me.
Totally. Me too, Carrie. All right.
Jill says.
So, yeah. So what the heck should we do if we shouldn't diet? We have an answer for you.
Some freedom, ladies.
Yeah.
Freedom.
So now to counter, we have 4 reasons to make peace with food and your body.
Yes.
Carrie, you want to take that one?
Number 1, to live a more fulfilled life. So stop letting diet culture and your body hold you back from. What has it been holding you back from? What have you been allowing it to hold you back from? So this is that no more waiting, like I mentioned at the beginning. What are you putting off from your life? Or what do you feel like, oh, I'll do that after I look a certain way, get down to a certain size or a weight, or whatever it is that you've got on hold right now. What is that? And go ahead and you can answer that in the chat if you'd like to. Because we all do it, right? How many times you're like, oh, I'm not going to the beach because I'm not putting a swimsuit on, right? Or I can't get up and do a presentation at work or whatever it is because I don't want people, I'm too heavy right now. I'll work on that when I'm thinner. All kinds of things that we put off because of our weight and our body image and how we feel about ourselves.
Or how we might perceive other people will kind of pick up on our body.
Right. Right.
So reason number 2 to make peace with food in our body is to resurrect your inner nutrition wisdom. So we mentioned this briefly earlier, but we're all born with knowing how much to eat, when to eat, and what to eat. And so the best example are infants and toddlers. They are the absolute best eaters. They drive us as adults nuts because we have so many food rules in our brains from all different diets or from media or from things we've heard or read. But really pay attention to infants and toddlers next time you're around them. Those of you who are parents already know, but infants, right? They cry when they're hungry. They stop when they're full. Toddlers will only eat when they feel like it. You know, maybe they're not hungry for meals, but they're going to have 20 snacks later. And maybe they only really want carrots today. Maybe that's their thing today. Maybe tomorrow they'll have a little bit more carbohydrate or starches. Maybe the next day they'll have more of a balanced plate each time. But really, they're the best eaters. They're only following what their body's telling them to do, or what they feel like. And that's what we call intuitive eating, right, Carrie?
Correct. Yes, that's what we're going to, this is kind of what all of this is based on too, and that intuition that we're all born with. And again, it's a matter of trusting yourself, right? Because somewhere along the way, and it's no one's fault. It's not our parents' fault. It's not, it's just they were doing what they were taught. Back in the day, they used to put babies on schedules, right? Hopefully they don't do that anymore, but instead of allowing the baby to let you know when they were hungry, but all these different rules that we adults instill in the children, we lose that inner nutrition wisdom, that intuition. And like Ashley talked about, over time, depending on how we've treated our bodies, we even lose, we don't even know what hunger feels like anymore. We just want someone to tell us when and what to eat and how much. And really, it's no one else's business. I like to say it's not really no one else's business to tell you what you should and shouldn't be eating. So it's your responsibility. You can tap into your own body wisdom, and there's so much freedom. It takes there's a process to it. Takes some time to gain it back, but it is so freeing once you've reached that.
So that leads us right into this next one, to take your power back and stop letting that darn diet culture boss you around. So instead of following what everyone else is telling you or you're hearing about, right? There's no possible way someone else can know what food satisfies you, how much you need to fill your belly up, when you're hungry. I mean, and let's face it, it varies from day to day even. Mm-hmm. So there's no way you can follow a plan and let it actually nourish you the way you're supposed to. And so learning what's best for your body is definitely a great step to that food and body freedom, because it can really, like I mentioned, nourish your body. And nourishment is way more than just about fuel. It's more about, making you feel nice and healthy and happy. And if somebody walks by with a nice hot pan of brownies that smell just like the ones your grandma used to make, it's going to be such a joyful moment for you to dig into that and trust your body to know how much is going to satisfy you, right? I think a lot of us are really nervous around foods, especially high fat, high sugar ones. They're like the bad foods, and they don't have to be like that. We mentioned feeling sort of out of control around foods or kind of chaotic around food, and that's a direct correlation or relationship to restriction. So restriction causes cravings, and restriction causes that out of control feeling around food. So when we remove that restriction, it's so freeing, like Carrie mentioned.
Yeah, and imagine, and at the hub, at the center of intuitive eating is satisfaction. So Ashley mentioned that. Imagine, when was the last time you really felt satisfied with what you are eating? And boiled naked chicken breasts and cauliflower, there's not much satisfaction in that. So you can have that satisfaction back again. Yes, enjoy food and movement again, and maybe for the first time. And those of you who are sort of, I hate exercise, this and that, probably one big reason that you have come to hate exercise is because exercise has been equated to burning calories to lose weight, right? So we like to call it movement. Some people call it my energizing time instead of exercising time. Whatever you need to call it to basically bring peace with your body and make peace with exercise and movement as well. Because scientists have come up, there are over 60, I think it's over 70 now, reasons and benefits to moving your body that go beyond weight loss. So think about that, all the different reasons to move your body. And it doesn't have to be this high intensity, beat your body up every time or at all exercise either. I think we fall into that as well, right? It has to be this certain level of exercise to count. And that is so far from the truth. To get health benefits, you just need to move more.
Right. And like Carrie mentioned, I like the term movement a little better than exercise, and even using the term joyful movement, because that's what exercise or activity or movement, or however you like to call it, really needs to be about. You know, if you enjoy the activity, the more likely you are to do it. And, you know, if we're always thinking about how exercise is burning calories, that's miserable. And when we're dieting and doing exercise, no wonder we start hating exercise, because we don't have enough energy to sustain it anyways. So the more we nourish our body and use joyful movement, I like those terms better than diet and exercise. But the more we do that, the more positive our relationship with that movement and our body and our food will be.
Yeah, because our bodies were made, they're designed to move. So when you get into that movement that you enjoy, it's a world of difference. So like, imagine life without the stress of, like a little caption, stepping on the scale. So I like to say, smash the scale, smash your scale, ladies. Like we talked about how it doesn't, all the scale is your relationship to gravity. But unfortunately, we place so much value and emotional value on that number, because that number equates to our self-worth, because that's what we've done, right? We can step on the scale and we can say, I've done good. I'm good today. Or step on it and like, oh, I screwed up. I suck. I'm bad. You know, and it'll determine the day that you have. It's the story that I said. You know, I was really low on the scale and I was congratulated for that, but I was super unhealthy. It could also work the other way, is if you have more muscle mass. I remember my oldest son, when the Wii Fit came out, he was doing the little assessment thing and he had his little MeWe guy. And when he put the weight in or whatever, his MeWe went, you know, and plumped out, and it was very discouraging to him. But he was considered in the obese category on the BMI scale, when in fact he was actually a very healthy, fit, muscular athlete. Mm-hmm. So the scales and the BMI scales, just I haven't owned it because I know with my history of anorexia how obsessive I would become on it. I don't even step on the scale at the doctor's office. Did you know that you don't have to? It is not a necessity. They might look at you cross-eyed. That's okay. You can refuse to be weighed at the doctor's, unless of course you're having surgery and they need to know, you know, for anesthesia. But you don't have to step on the scale. And this scares a lot of people though, because a lot of people think, right, Ashley, that the scales are accountability.
Yes, they like to keep track, right?
Right.
And like you mentioned, keeping track of things like the weights or calories or exercise or steps or anything like that really drives that obsessive behavior around food and activity. And that's kind of where we can fall into this rabbit hole of maybe getting a little too far into it and having it become the disordered eating behavior or an eating disorder. Humans really like data. So the less data we give ourselves to obsess over, the more free we will be. And so that leads into that next bullet point about obsessing over food. So try not to track it. And then also worrying about whether you're choosing good or bad food. You know, food is really all equal. A Twinkie would save us if we were dying, right? So all food is equal. And when we give some food that bad label, we're actually giving it power over us. Because let's just take chocolate cake as an example. It's kind of my favorite. When we think of chocolate cake as this bad, naughty thing, we avoid it, we avoid it, we avoid it. We shouldn't have it. I don't want it. I can't do that. And then we're going to have it. And like we talked about earlier, we're going to maybe feel that little out of control feeling around it. And we're going to probably overdo it and probably maybe feel sick out. Or maybe the next day we really feel like broccoli or a salad and maybe BLTs with bacon for dinner. It's all about listening to our bodies. Our bodies really push us to get a lot of variety in our foods because that's how we get all of our nutrition in.
And also sometimes what happens is when the foods that you have labeled as bad, can't eat, when you take that label off it and make those foods emotionally equal, sometimes when you'll go to eat that food and realize, oh, it's not, doesn't really taste as good as I thought it did. But because in your brain, you've put this, red X on it. No, I can't eat that. That's just what your brain wants.
Yeah, that forbidden fruit. Yeah.
Right.
Totally. So we're here to let you know that it's possible you can ditch those diets and the diet mentality for those sneaky diets. We can take back our intuitive eaters and stop being so confused around food and nutrition. There's so much information out there, and a lot of it is misinformation. Most food rules are not even based in real science. There's a lot of like fear mongering going around too, with you have to eat perfectly or very clean, and that's just not necessarily true either.
Right. If I to inject, for instance, because carbs are such a big one right now, right? Everyone's cutting carbs out. And Ashley, what is the only fuel that your brain uses?
Carbohydrates.
Yeah.
I love carbs. And I hear a lot of people talking about how they feel. I want to mention this. I know it's going to take a few minutes, but a lot of people feel like they're addicted to carbohydrates or sugar. And I want to just have everyone really get their feelings validated that yes, it feels very much like that because they're so bad in the media, right? If we eat carbs, we're bad. But carbs are our main energy source. And so it's no wonder that we get pleasure from eating them because again, back to caveman days, I talk a lot about those. Caveman days, our brains just constantly told us in the background to eat carbs, eat carbs, eat carbs, because it's our main energy source. If we didn't eat carbs and if we didn't get pleasure from eating carbs, we wouldn't have eaten them and we wouldn't have survived. So carbs, again, are our main energy source. We really need them. Not to mention all the vitamins they have. Carbs have a lot of B vitamins for people that don't know that. Another thing that you can do with intuitive eating is learning to accept ourselves and our bodies. And like we mentioned at the beginning, to stop letting our body and our insecurities that our culture makes us feel, stop letting those hold us back. So what are you waiting for?
Yeah, I think it's time to almost get angry at diet culture for, they've taken away our power, and there's no shame in that. We're not, just making it clear, we are not shaming anyone. This has just been a part of our culture. And we've all struggled with it. Ashley and I are not above struggling with it, so, either looking at some, photos on on social media and stuff and thinking, oh, I need to, you know, especially the more we get into being in front of the camera. But so it's something, it's a process, and it's not about perfection. There's no perfect way to eat. It's really about you taking back your power and figuring out what foods and what movements work for your body, with, you know, without someone else telling you that you have to look a certain way, that you have to eat a certain way, and move a certain way in order to be successful or you know, have self-worth, or anything like that.
And yeah, just to expand on what Carrie said, thank you for mentioning that, Carrie, because diet culture is so ingrained in all of us, it never really goes away 100%. Like even Carrie and I, who live, breathe, are super passionate about this. Like she said, we're not immune. You know, we all have thoughts about things that just sort of pop up, and then we can say, well, where the heck did that come from? We know that that's not true, and then we shove it away, right? So things do come up. And so, like Carrie said, it's definitely a process and a big learning curve. And I like to think of it more as unlearning diet culture.
Mm.
Yeah. And so,
and when those thoughts do pop up, the more you practice it, the more quickly you can quiet that voice, right? And reframe it into the truth.
totally. So one way you can do that is trying this activity we made for you guys. So it's the call out diet culture activity. So for one day or however long you want, keep track of how many times that you see or hear or encounter diet culture. So some examples are before and after photos on social media. And I prefer to refer to before and after photos as before and during photos, because like we mentioned earlier, that after photo is really part of their during process, because in probably 3 to 5 years, they're going to be the same size that they were in that before photo or larger. And so it makes us feel like crap seeing those before and after pictures, because it's like, well, maybe we look worse than their before picture, and that just makes me feel terrible. Or how come they could do it and I tried this program and I couldn't do it? It's because they're really not finished with their journey yet. Another example of coming into contact with diet culture is any type of diet talk. So anything about calorie counting, types of diets, any food rules. So, you know, going to that next bullet point, categorizing foods as good or bad, or even justifying eating for any reason. Like, oh, I ran 3 miles today, so now I can have that. I'm going to use my chocolate cake example again. So now I can have that chocolate cake. You deserve to eat. We all need to nourish our bodies. We all need food on a consistent, regular basis, not just once in a while, not 1,000 calories, just for a couple quick tidbits. Most of us, if we were, you know, asleep for 24 hours, we would need at least 1,000 calories just to perform all the daily activities our body has to do. And toddlers, they need 1,200 calories a day, at least. So us as adults, we have a lot more going on than toddlers, and we're usually more active than toddlers. Well, maybe not, but if we're doing some strenuous workouts, maybe we're more active than toddlers, but we definitely need more than 1,200 calories a day. Carrie, anything else to add?
Nope.
Okay.
Got it.
Super. So we have a couple things to wrap up with. We have our contact information. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can screenshot that, or I think Heather's going to send a follow-up email with our contact information too. So if you want to get in touch with either of us or both of us, we have some websites there listed. And then that email address at the bottom, the No More Waiting 2021, goodness. That's a joint email account. So we'll both see that. And as a little thank you for coming to this session with us, we have a little gift for you all. So I'm going to put a link in the chat box, but it will also be in the follow-up email that Heather sends you all. So I just sent it to the chat box, but that is a little ebook gift, 7 tips to ditch diet culture. So it has some really good stuff in there. So if you guys want to click on that link, you can put your email addresses in and you'll get an email to download that. And then as a bonus, we were feeling really, really excited about this. We're hosting a program in July. That's still next month because it's still June. We're hosting a virtual event. So it's the beginner's guide to breaking free from the diet mentality for real food and body freedom. So it's just going to be a little bit more elaborate on today's session, go into a little bit more detail and give you a little bit more. I think we covered a lot of the why it's a great idea to get into intuitive eating, and this is going to be a little bit more of the how.
Yep.
Anything else, Carrie?
I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. And I think we've got some questions.
Yeah.
So let's see. First question was, is it possible to get a PDF of the data? So sharing the presentation, it will be, we've recorded it and it will be available on the LRH Facebook page and YouTube channel, but I'm sure I'll let you ladies jump in whether or not you're willing to share your slides as well.
Sure. If you want to have a copy of the slides, if you want to drop your email in the chat box or get in contact with us at that No More Waiting 2021 email, we'll be happy to share that with you.
Let's see. Real quick on, so a couple people raised the point of Noom, which is,
Okay.
I think more and more people are hearing about, and how does it fit in? And people have heard that it's different than some of your typical. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'll start, and Carrie, if you want to add anything, let me know. So Noom is definitely one of those sneaky diets in disguise. They market themselves a lot as anti-diet or non-diet. They use a lot of that language in their marketing. But when you really start getting into Noom and you sign up, which I did for a little while because I was curious about it, they're still categorizing foods. So some of the things I saw were they're using like red, yellow, and green foods. And so again, that's, you know, like red is high calorie, bad food. Yellow is like, be careful, don't eat too much. And green food is kind of like similar to Weight Watchers free on the point system. So there's definitely some diet talk and culture in there. And the goal is still for weight loss for most of it. So I would say that Noom is still a diet in disguise. So another point of intuitive eating is that weight loss is never the central point of intuitive eating. And the goal of intuitive eating is to, again, get back to your body's own cues. And when we do that and we include joyful movement, our body will tend to naturally, or our body will tend to settle out at what we call our natural weight. And it might not be our favorite weight or our favorite place to be, but our bodies tend to hang out at a size that they're really comfortable with as far as survival and giving us the best health and function. Carrie, anything to add about that?
No, I think that's it. I mean, I think, like Ashley said, Noom, it is one of those sneaky ones. They kind of package it into a behavioral change program, which it does have those components, absolutely. But, you know, like she said, when they're warning you basically about certain foods, where intuitive eating is more, you know, obviously barring any food allergies or foods that you know already that don't agree with you, but basically making all foods emotionally equal and tapping into that, you know, that mindfulness, asking yourself, what does my body need right now? Paying attention to hunger, figuring out what hunger feels like in your body. There's all kinds of things with the intuitive eating. Instead of using the external, which is what the diets do, they tell you what, how much, when, it's tapping into your internal. Remember we said, like, really it's no one else's business to tell you what you should be eating and how much and when. It's you listening to your own body. And that also extends to all these other things too. You know, like, oh, my body, I need to move. You know, have you ever sat for so long, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to stand up and move and do something, right? Or your body's cue to need rest. I think some of us have lost that as well. So it's really extends even further than just food and eating. It really is a total self-care program as well.
And just something quickly that Carrie just made me think of, when we're dieting or restricting or taking part in diet culture actively, we're really encouraged to ignore our hunger, right? Like, so the less calories I can eat, the better I am today. Or if I can ignore my hunger for so many hours, that makes me good. And I really like to compare that to following our body's cues around having to urinate. So having a full bladder, are we going to ignore that? Maybe for a few minutes to find a bathroom, but probably not. And it's so similar, yet in diet culture, we're rewarded for ignoring those cues.
Right. Yeah, and you're actually shamed for feeling hungry, right? It's how often in diet cultures, like, you shouldn't even be hungry when let's say you just ate an hour ago, and if you're on a diet, probably wasn't enough food for you, and an hour later you're hungry again, and you're told to what? Go for a walk or drink some water, and right when you figure out again what hunger really feels like in your body, that is your body's cue, like, hey, like, hello, we need some nourishment here. And so listening to your body's cues, like Ashley said, is so important. And I'm just seeing in the chat that someone said that she had Noom, but they encourage you to weigh daily. So
Yeah,
that's another big clue that it really is still a diet wrapped up in a prettier ribbon.
Yeah.
Let's see. We do just a comment kind of on that same front. One of the participants is a lifetime Weight Watcher member and has hit the goal weight at least twice. Let's see, another comment here. I think this goes back to when you posed the question, what are you holding back from? This participant said wearing all their clothes, their wardrobe dwindles as their weight increases. Carrie, could you reiterate the name of your book, please? We have a couple people asking about.
Yep, and I put it in there. Squeezing your size 14 self into a size 6 world: a real woman's guide to food, fitness, and self-acceptance. And I did add that to the bottom of the chat.
And I just saw somebody else looking for one of the links to the website. So I'm going to put that back. And I also just saw another question about our July event. We don't have the registration page quite ready for that yet, but if you go to the link I just put in, it's a MailChimp link. If you enter your email address to get the free gift, you'll get email updates about our future events and programs and fun stuff.
Let's see. Another comment on the fact that you get weighed every time you go to the doctor's office. The first thing that they do. It can be depressing, and this individual is often told that they just need to keep trying to lose weight. Let's see. Another person commented, that's all I ever do is think about food all day. And then we had a question, I think going back to carbohydrates, wondering if all carbs are fuel.
Yes. Yep. So there's a couple different types of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are sort of this big umbrella nutrient. So things that fall under carbohydrates are fruits, vegetables, starchy stuff. The big 3 types of carbs are starches, sugars, and fiber. And so dairy even has some sugar in there. It's naturally occurring. So yeah, all carbs are fuel, and our body breaks some down a little better than others for sure. Different places, different, rates, but yeah, the all foods fit thing can really help us navigate the carb world.
Yeah. I'm seeing that Wendy is having a problem seeing the chat. So Wendy, in the follow-up email, the link will be in there as well.
Yep. It'll be labeled free gift, 7 tips to ditch diet culture. So just be on the lookout for your email.
Yep.
Let's see. There must be a turnaround time for your body to adjust.
There certainly can be. And I think it's really important to go into this with not necessarily an expectation, but the possibility of our bodies changing. So we can't really guarantee what our body's going to do when we change our calorie intake or if we change our activity levels. So even if I took 100 people of the same size, age, gender, basically clones of each other, and I put them all into a little research study, my little research bubble, and I gave them all the same amount of calories and foods, like they ate exactly the same thing, and then I only allowed them to move the same way for the same time, lots of things would happen to everybody. Some people might gain weight, some people might lose weight, some people might stay the same. So there's really no guarantee that what we're doing with our nutrition and or activity will change our size. And I think that's really important to know, especially going into something like this, because I know that fear of weight gain is a very real feeling. I totally get that. Your feelings are so valid because, like we talked about, our culture really instills that thinner is better. And our world is really made for thin people. Like our culture is super fat phobic. People in larger bodies, they don't know if clothes in the stores are going to fit them. They don't know if there's going to be chairs at an event that they'll be comfortable in or can even fit in. Doctors' offices have gotten better about having like the no chair or no arm on chairs, but not everywhere has sort of gotten with the times. So it definitely makes life easier to be in a thinner body to navigate our world. But at what cost? Like we talked about, constantly thinking about food or, weight cycling, like we talked about. I see somebody's comment about looking forward to pasta. Yes, please, please do.
And the other, we didn't talk about, and we will in the next event, but also fullness. So we've talked about hunger, but part of intuitive eating is also paying attention to your fullness. So in other words, if you're afraid of constantly overeating and the weight gain and stuff, part of it is you're also being mindful of not portion sizes, not measuring your food or anything like that. It's paying attention to how your body's feeling. So as you're eating, how is this feeling in my body? Am I getting full, right? And paying attention to your fullness cues also. So that's another cue that your body gives. It's like, okay, I've had enough. So if you grew up in the clean plate club, right? It's hard. So there's some emotional and mental obstacles that you also will work on with that.
Definitely. And those can get eroded away just like hunger signals too. And so sometimes people feel like they're eating and eating and eating and they don't get full until it's too late and they're really full and uncomfortable. And so, yeah, intuitive eating is about getting back in touch with that for sure.
I'm not seeing any more questions or comments come in. Just as a final reminder, this session is being recorded and it'll be available on the LRH website, LRH Facebook page, LRH YouTube channel. So if you have anybody that you think would benefit or was hoping to attend but couldn't attend tonight's event, that will be available in the next couple of days.
Yep. And don't forget to sign up for your free gift when you get the reminder email or if you were able to see it in the chat box.
Yes, absolutely. And we thank you so much for attending and listening to us. We hope that this helps. Hopefully you had some aha moments or at least some questions to want to learn more about it.
Definitely.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Ashley and Heather.
Yeah.
And thank you all for attending. Feel free to let us know if there are any other topics you'd like for our virtual health and wellness events. And we hope maybe we can see Carrie and Ashley again soon.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Thank you, Gail, for asking us to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing.
Our pleasure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.